On behalf of the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms, that's NCPCF, and its affiliated organizations, Executive Director Steve Downs, the Honorable Congressman John Conyers, Samahat al-Sheikh Imam Ilahi, and our special keynote speaker and author, James Yee, I welcome you to an evening of dialogue and discussion as we hope to strengthen our communities by taking a stand against Islamophobia. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rashid Beydoun, and I am the Executive Director of the Arab American Civil Rights League. The ACRL, which has, it's truly been a humbling experience to say the least. I recently have been appointed to this position, and little did I know of the grave need of ensuring that our civil liberties are protected. And so taking upon this role, I've really been right at the front lines of the various civil rights initiatives that are of most importance to our community. The Arab American Civil Rights League is a nonprofit organization that was created, recently created by our founding chairman, attorney Hedaya Jayyousi, in response to the ongoing discrimination and overwhelming need of this community for advocacy and protection of Arab and Muslim American civil rights and liberties. Equipped with a unique and diverse board of directors and a very energetic executive director, that would be me, the ACRL has been able to reach out to various communities and collaborate with issues pertaining to civil rights, both locally and internationally. We know that in the United States, we know that it is a nation of immigrants, and that in many ways immigrants built our great nation. We know that immigrant experience has, in many ways, been the core American experience, along with the experiences of African Americans liberated from slavery. The diversity and energy that immigrants have brought to our country has been and continues to be one of the greatest strengths. But we also know that we have sometimes dealt harshly and unfairly with immigrants and non-citizen residents. Okay. According to the Pew Research Center, the number of Americans with favorable views of Islam dropped 41% in 2005 to 30% in 2010. Such views are perpetuated by anti-Muslim campaign messages from political candidates, hearings on Muslim radicalization on Capitol Hill, and the controversy over the proposed Islamic Center near Ground Zero. The fact that Arab and Muslims can experience high levels of discrimination and still identify as Americans, if you ask me, is uniquely an American phenomenon. In Europe, Muslims are denied the possibility of becoming an integral part of the country that they have settled for generations. For example, after 2 generations in Germany, Turks still don't call themselves Germans. We don't have that here in the United States. We're proud Americans. This evening, we are blessed to have a diverse group of speakers that will shed light on the importance of community participation and involvement. And at this point, our first speaker is really no stranger to our community. I'd like to call to the podium a spiritual leader who has been on the front lines fighting against oppression and injustice of all Americans, Muslims or not. Sheikh Imam Ilahi is one of the founders of the director of this beautiful mosque that has generously hosted us this evening. Because of Imam Ilahi's vision and guidance, the Islamic House of Wisdom continues to be a remarkable institution where Muslims and interfaith groups attend to seek more knowledge and importance of religion. Let us welcome Imam Ilahi to the podium for some words of wisdom. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you all, brothers and sisters. It's an honor and great pleasure to be part of this wonderful quality gathering and with the presence of our beloved Congressman John Conyers and our guest speakers, James Yee and Steve Downs and other panelists and brothers and sisters who organized this. God bless you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful. I know we have beautiful words of wisdom from our speakers. I try to just keep it short, just to welcome everyone and appreciate your presence here, and saying that this Islamophobia issue is something that harmful to everyone. It doesn't hurt just the Muslims and the Islamic faith. It hurts our country. It hurts the society in general. Part of it is ignorance. Some people make it like a political thing and approach the Islamic faith and the Muslim community with an arrogant attitude, and they make business out of this. We are a community and a faith of dialogue and discussion over issues, and we believe in education. It is sad that sometimes we get to the point that even some politicians, some congressmen, and I know that our beloved Congressman Conyers is tired of hearing this stuff. Sometimes even in the Congress somebody says that Constitution should not protect the Muslims. It is paralyzing statement. How can someone even say such a thing? Or talking about Sharia law and so-called, they are here for radicalization of America. Radicalization of America. We do need participation as Muslim community. We do need organization among ourselves. We do need interfaith. We do need a better dialogue and connection among our communities, Muslims, Jews, Christians, other communities. This is so important. I remember it was a couple of years ago in ABC that there was a discussion, should Americans fear Islam? To this point that it became a public issue that like Americans should be afraid of Islam and Muslims. No one denies that in every community, including Muslim community, in global level, there are crazy mentality and crazy individuals. And it is about people, not faith. We find it in Muslim community, in Christian community, in Jewish community. We have KKK, and they claim to be Christians. Then we have some of those Israeli settlers with their aggressive and crazy attitudes towards the Palestinians. And then you see the Al-Qaeda that killed more Muslims than any other nationality or ethnicities. Still, we are victims in the mosque in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Iraq, in so many other places that Muslims are target of takfiri attitude, what we call it takfiri, the individuals that they think they are Muslims and everybody else is not Muslim. We remember that the president in one of, I think, a State of Union lecture, he said that American Muslims are part of our American family. That was a very sincere description that Muslim community is part of this great nation and great family as America. In addition to our faith values, we believe in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that all human beings born free and equal in dignity and rights, provides the right of life, liberty, security, peace, and education. These are rights for every individual. And Sharia law is about 5 fundamental things: protection of people's life, intellect, integrity, property, and faith. This is what we believe, that even the Quran clearly says, La ikraha fid-din, there is no compulsion in religion. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself said to other communities in his time, based on revelation, Lakum dinukum waliyad din. My religion is mine and your religion is yours. We can agree to disagree and appreciate the gift of diversity, which is a dynamic gift from God to humanity. He could make us same in appearance, in mentality, in emotions, but that was not His will. He wanted us to be different. Then the life is not boring. Then we can learn from one another, we can teach one another, and we can experience the knowing one another and have a constructive competition. It is a good gathering to welcome the summertime and summer season. And actually today my whole lecture in Friday prayer was that how can we turn and transform this summer season to a period of spiritual and intellectual construction, because we have some free time and we have to use the gift of free time for something constructive. I appreciate your patience and I welcome you again, and may God bless you and bless this gathering and the result, and bless the intention, sincere intention of brothers and sisters who were behind this project and behind this gathering. Thank you.
The NCPCF, which is the organization that put this today, the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms, has decided to come back to Michigan because they realize the importance of building a coalition. A coalition, as well as dealing with prominent individuals. Their mission is, one, to educate the public about the erosion of civil and political freedoms in the society and the abuses of prisoners within the U.S. criminal justice system, especially after 9/11, and to advocate for the preservation of those freedoms and to defend those rights according to the U.S. Constitution. A lot of people tend to forget we still have a document out there that's called the U.S. Constitution. Last time I checked, it's still there, right? And it's important to us to uphold that U.S. Constitution as citizens. When we say we the people, it means we the people have to uphold those rights. Well, no one better than this next individual who has been really committed to the U.S. Constitution his whole life, and to really help better understand what we can do to strengthen our communities. I'd like to welcome our next speaker, who has been reaching out to various communities and hosting forums such as the one this evening. Attorney Steve Downs graduated from Cornell Law School in 1969. Most of his professional career was spent as the chief attorney with New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct in Albany, New York. His job was to discipline bad judges. Oh my God, we wish we would have you here. He retired in 2003, and then he became a volunteer member of the defense team for Yassin Arif, who was prosecuted and convicted of terrorism-related charges. Out of this experience, he came to realize that not only had the government convicted an innocent individual, that is Yassin Arif, but that the government had done so deliberately. Moreover, it was doing the same thing to hundreds of other innocent Muslims all across this country, using a program referred to as preemptive prosecution, right, in which innocent people would be convicted of false charges to preempt them from possibly committing future crimes based on their perceived ideology. In 2008, he became one of the founders of Project Salam to document the protests against preemptive prosecution. In 2010, Project Salam became one of the founding organizations of the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms, to rally the country as to the dangers of preemptive prosecution, profiling, and prisoner abuse. Let us welcome our brother to the stage, the Executive Director of the NCPCF, Attorney Steve Downs.
Assalamu alaikum. I think you took my whole speech away there. I don't know what I have left here. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I wanted to pick up on something that Imam Ilahi said, that Islamophobia hurts everybody. It doesn't just hurt Muslims, it hurts them a lot, but it hurts us all. And I wanted to talk a little bit about two aspects of that, two things that have come to my attention that are of severe importance to the entire community, not just to the Muslims, but to the non-Muslim communities as well, to all of us. And I want to give a little background as to how this happened. After 9/11, the FBI was charged with the task of preventing another terrorist attack. And so the question would be, how do you, as the FBI, go about doing that? How do you decide who is about to commit a crime and then stop it before it occurs? And they decided to focus on ideology. The theory being that ideology will predict criminal behavior. If you know what a person is thinking, you can predict that they will eventually commit a crime. And if you know that, then you can stop the crime by simply locking them up before they commit the crime on some pretextual charge. You just make something up. And it is from this idea that we get the idea of preemptive prosecution, the idea of bringing charges against people based on their ideology in order to prevent them from engaging in criminal conduct. And it's sort of the incarnation, I guess, of the Cheney 1% doctrine. You remember that 1% doctrine? If there's 1% chance that a person might engage in a terrorist activity, then you have to act as though it's a certainty. And the logic of that, if you follow it out, is that it would be better for 99 innocent people to go to jail than to allow even one terrorist to go free. And this is in a legal system that had always prided itself on the fact that it was better to let one guilty person go free than to allow one innocent person to be convicted. And now we have a system that is being implemented by the FBI in which essentially we are saying it is better for 99 innocent people to be locked up than for one terrorist possibility to go free. In order to understand this a little bit, I just want to point out the wall behind me. You can see this is a really battered wall. I drag it around everywhere I go. It's been on planes, it's been inspected by the TSA. When folded up, it looks like a missile launcher, so every time I take it down to the airport, it's gone over with a fine-tooth comb. But I bring it, and I bring these posters also because I want everybody to understand that we're talking about real people here. These are not hypothetical ideas. These are all real people with real stories and real lives, and with wives and children who are suffering as a result of this. And one way to understand what preemptive prosecution is all about is to look at the people on that wall. There's 155 people on the wall, and if we concentrate only on the ones that are green, well, let me give you the color code. The green are the Muslims. The pink are the peace activists. There's a group of peace activists that are being charged with material support for terrorism because of their peace activists, because of their peace activities. There's a blue guy down here, that's Bradley Manning. He's my only cyber criminal at this point, but I'm sure there will be more of them later. And because the roots of preemptive prosecution go way, way back, it goes back to a time of COINTELPRO. And a lot of the students probably don't know COINTELPRO, but this was a time of lawlessness in America. Literally, the FBI went out and targeted people based on their political beliefs and associations. And they particularly went after the African American community, not just with false charges, although they brought false charges, admittedly false charges, and they convicted people of murder that they knew they never committed and locked them up for a very long time. But there were also targeted assassinations. Fred Hampton, for example, Mark Clark. These were people that were actually targeted and assassinated by local police working with the FBI back in the 60s. So they're down here in brown, and I don't want them to ever be forgotten because many of the people from that era are still in jail, falsely in jail. It has never been adequately investigated. And then finally there's a group down here. There's so many of them in that group, I can't even rate them all out. But they are the people that have been preemptively deported, the people in immigration, the people that ICE have gone after, and the whole disaster that is our immigration policy. In any event, that's what the color code is. If you look at just the people in green, the Muslims, I would say the average jail time that most of them are serving is about 25 years. And you would say, wow, if you're in jail for 25 years, you must have done something pretty serious. And yet, if you look at all those cases, you put them all together, not one single person died in any of those cases. Not one single person was injured in any of those cases. Not one piece of property was damaged in any of those cases. Nothing happened. And the government would say, well, yeah, duh, that's what preemptive prosecution is all about. We got them before they did anything. And I'm saying, you don't know that. You don't know that any of them were going to commit anything. You're just pretending, you're making it up, you're faking it. Because that's what the model is that you were given. And it doesn't make America safer. No society can tolerate the level of injustice that you are going ahead with. And that's what the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms was set up to do, was to call attention to this. And one of the things we have to recognize is that although it started with the Muslims, it is now spreading out because the logic of it is based on ideology. So that, for example, we have peace activists in the Midwest who are engaged in trying to make peace in disputed parts of the world. And while they're out there, they have to go out and meet with different groups. And if some of those happen to be designated terrorist organizations, that would be material support for terrorism. So already you can see that this is going out there. It's going to go after the environmentalists, the animal rights people. All of these people have ended up being targeted as well. I just want to quickly say that there are two ways that they go after them. One is to create, to criminalize conduct that nobody thinks should be criminal and in fact is laudable conduct. Let me give you an example. An example would be where you donate to an organization hoping to relieve suffering in the world. And if that has enough connection to a designated terrorist organization, you can be charged with material support for terrorism, even if you don't want to create or help terrorists, even if you're trying to avoid terrorists. And perhaps the best example of that would be the Holy Land Foundation that was building schools and hospitals in Palestine. The government charged with material support for terrorism, and even though the government acknowledged that not one nickel of that money went to support a terrorist organization, the government said, yeah, but you built schools and hospitals in territories that were controlled by designated terrorist organizations like Hamas. And therefore, your schools and hospitals contributed to the prestige of Hamas, and that represents material support for terrorism. 65 years in jail. Hassan al-Ashi is spending 65 years in jail for nothing more than pure compassion as the largest Muslim charity in the United States. Another example for it would be Tariq Mahana and indeed Shifa Siddiqui, both of whom were intellectuals. They advocated strongness on behalf of the Muslim community. They wanted, Tariq Mahana was advocating resistance in Muslim countries to foreign invasions. And for that exercise of free speech, the government said that was support for designated terrorist organizations. Free speech, that is also now illegal if the government decides that you've gone too far in supporting ideas that could help a designated terrorist organization. Just perhaps to summarize that aspect of it, using these material support for terrorism statutes to criminalize beneficial conduct, charitable activity, free speech, peacemaking, social hospitality, can now all be used to go and get you and put you in jail, even though you've never done anything illegal. Another way to do it is if you are not engaged in material support for terrorism in a way that is actionable by the government, they can assign an agent provocateur to come in and try to talk you into illegal conduct. Some of the ways they do it, in the Tariq Shah case, for example, they decided ideologically they had a problem with him, so they assigned a guy to go in and become his best friend. Tariq Shah was a famous jazz player. He actually played bass at the Clinton's inaugural. And they signed this guy to go in and take bass lessons from him. They became very good friends. Then the guy, the FBI agent, claimed to be homeless and moved in with him. All the time following him around with a tape recorder, trying to talk him into saying just enough to get a conviction. And he finally, after 2 years of tracing, following this guy around. Another one would be the Newburgh Four, where they targeted a group of young men, recent converts to Islam, didn't know much about the religion. They were poor. One of them had serious mental problems. One of them had health problems. And they went after them. And because of the serious poverty, the agent provocateur offered them $250,000 if they would help him plant a bomb outside a synagogue. And the guys did it. They made sure the bomb wasn't armed. They claimed they didn't know how to do it, but they put the bomb out there. That was enough. They were convicted, sent off to jail. But imagine the government paying $250,000 to get somebody to commit a crime so that they could solve it. Does that sound right? Another thing they do is targeting the most vulnerable people in the population. They will find people with serious mental problems, Muslims, and then talk them over years into saying enough that they can charge them with material support for terrorism. I think one of the saddest cases is the Siraj Matan case, where he was a young, vulnerable, sweet guy, very impressionable, with an IQ of 78. And in 2 years, they were finally able to talk him into committing something that they could charge him with. But this is what preemptive prosecution is about. And I just want to say that last week, there was a kind of a bombshell occurred where the Civil Liberties Union Googled some documents, foiled some documents from the Department of Justice. And it showed that the mission has now changed from 9/11, trying to prevent another 9/11, to actively misrepresenting or going after political activists and claiming that they are terrorists, and manipulating, calling domestic, identifying domestic threats all across the country that don't exist. In other words, it's become a political movement because, of course, this logically follows from the ideological basis of preemptive prosecution. So anyone now who's anti-government or anti-corporation, environmentalists, animal rights people, peace activists, communists, Occupy people, dissidents of all kinds, are liable to be investigated by the FBI for their ideology alone, because it would tend to predict criminal activity, according to the FBI. Now, just quickly, I don't have too much time, but I wanted to touch on another aspect of what has happened here, which affects all of us, Islamophobia, which affects all of us. And that is what happens to prisoners once they get to jail. Normally, of course, you just go to jail. But if you're charged with a terrorist charge, the government has more routinely been taking people and putting them into solitary confinement right from the start. And solitary confinement is very debilitating. Under the Geneva Conventions, it is improper, illegal, to hold anyone in jail for more than 2 weeks in solitary confinement, because it is equivalent to torture beyond that. And yet, they will take these people and say they are so dangerous because of the fake terrorism charges that they have to be held in solitary confinement for years. pre-trial, at a time when they're presumed innocent. And as many people have testified to the debilitating effects of solitary confinement. After only a few weeks, your mind becomes mushy. You cannot form words. You become paranoid. You become panic. You have panic attacks. You are unable to think clearly. And from one point of view, of course, from an interrogator's point of view, this is the ideal situation, because if you can't think clearly, people can start to plant ideas in your mind and get you to cooperate. And so this is obviously a tool that they use on people that they think are vulnerable, to try to get them to either cooperate with them or testify against somebody else, or at least plead guilty before they ever have to go to a trial, go through with a trial, which is so fraught with error that they might possibly lose it. And so, for example, you have a case like Mohammed Warsami, where he was charged essentially with nothing more than lying to the government about something that the government actually accepted as true. And so without any clear basis, they held him in solitary confinement for 5.5 years. And finally, the government, the lawyer went to the government and said he can't stand it anymore. He's going crazy. He will plead guilty to anything as long as he can get out. And the government said fine. And they allowed him to plead guilty to something. And within 6 months, he was released. And get this is the funny part about it. As long as he hadn't pled guilty, the government maintained he was one of the most dangerous people on earth. He was so dangerous that if any word from his got out, it would be like a virus that would go through the whole community and everybody would die from this thing, you know? And the minute he pled guilty, they didn't care anymore. They let him go. He wasn't dangerous anymore. This is the hypocrisy of the government, the fakeness, the phoniness of what is going on. And I have to say, if you talk to some of these prisoners who have gone through this, it's a very, very painful experience. One prisoner in jail, described how every day he would get up and he would wish that maybe the guard would come and shoot him in the head so that he could be put out of his misery. Another person said every day he got up was a struggle to keep his sanity, because every day he just felt if he just let go, he would lose his sanity. He would go completely crazy, and it would be the only escape there was from this isolation. And I'm particularly pleased that the wife of Kifeh Jayyousi is going to be here. Is going to talk later about the CNUs. I'm not going to talk about them particularly, but you're going to hopefully address that. It's another one. There's a special, mostly Muslim prisons in the United States where these people are placed. So I simply want to point all of these things out as problems that had started, that focused initially on the Muslim community, but will rapidly change and will rapidly spread to the non-Muslim community. It is something that we all have to be aware of. We all have to fight against. One of the most heartening things that I have seen is that the peace activists, the 23 peace activists there, and particularly Carlos Montes, who was a Chicano labor leader and was charged by the government with essentially a weapons charge based on because they wanted to take him down. And all over the country, there was a huge wave of support for these peace activists. They said, what? The government wants to take down the peace activists? They would break down their door and ransack their community and get them to testify before a grand jury for making peace? Are you crazy? And because of that, for 2 years, the Justice Department has been paralyzed. They have not indicted them. They don't know what to do with it because they realized that the people would be really angry. And Carlos Montes, the same thing. People rose up. I'm wearing 2 bands that I got from the peace activists and for Carlos Montes to remind me every morning when I get up in the shower that these are people that I have to think about every day, and call the DA and tell them to drop the charges. And because of that, the DA backed down in the Carlos Montes case just last week and made a deal and let him out without any jail time, anything else. And it was all because of public pressure. And I want to have, I'm getting the time, I want to make sure that the Muslims get that same kind of support. That's what NCPCF is here to try to organize is make sure that Muslims get the same support that the non-Muslim community does, that everybody's treated equally, because that's what civil rights is about. It's not a Muslim, non-Muslim thing. It is a question of being all treated equally. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about some of the things that you can do to support the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. Right now, I'm going to say thank you for your attention, and I'll have the next speaker.
Thank you for that very detailed report. I think people oftentimes, when they look at prisoners, usually it's looked at with one brush. They committed an act, they committed a criminal act, and thus they deserve to be incarcerated. And typically that's the thinking or the mentality that goes with this. And so oftentimes the people who don't get mentioned are the families of the victims who were wrongfully accused and wrongfully incarcerated. I myself was born and raised here in the United States, Providence Hospital. I have yet to leave the United States. After September 11th, it was really just like many Muslims and Arab Americans, that's when we really realized, oh, so we're different. So till today, I won't forget coming downstairs the next day, September 12th, and noticing my mom going crazy. She's on the phone, making phone calls. My dad is not home. I come from a sibling, I have 6 siblings in total, and my sisters were crying, and I'm like, what's going on? Dad is not here. My dad was one of the founders of a local Islamic charity prior to September 11th. Again, just like Christian charities, Jewish charities, non-religious charities, right? The purpose of those charities are to provide, assistance, help, right? But my dad was downtown when he was being interrogated. The FBI picked him up. And till today, my dad will not answer the phone. The phone can be ringing right in front of him. He will not answer the phone. He is traumatized. Everyone in this room has been affected by the, these preemptive prosecutions. I know. In fact, let's do a quick survey. Raise some hands if you know someone or maybe a family member that was affected by, recent legislation such as the Patriot Act or, government intrusion. Can I get a raise a hand of anyone in here? It's a pretty compelling stat. So with that, not taking too much time, our next guest is going to really give a little background as to the importance of being educated about these preemptive attacks, and it is the victims of preemptive prosecution of the war on terror. And Dr. Mel Underblake is an educator and researcher formerly at the University of South Florida. She's also the founding member of Friends of Human Rights, which began shortly after the arrest of Dr. Sami al-Iran in 2003. Since that time, she has focused on calling attention to the current wave of preemptive prosecutions and the dangers of the Patriot Act. She has toured the country educating the public about the erosion of civil liberties since 9/11, screening the documentary USA vs. and am I saying this right? Iran? Al-Aryan, see? There you go. I'm out of it, trust me. I can say those da'as and the khas. Al-Aryan. She's been able to screen this over 60 times on campuses, churches, mosques, and community centers. She serves as a member of the board of directors and the steering committee on the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms, and as the interim director of Education and Outreach Committee. I'd like to call her up to the podium. If you would do so.
I'm going to talk to you from over here because we're going to have a slideshow and I need to see what's on the screen, so I talk about that. As I said, I'm going to be telling you the story of how I came to know about preemptive prosecution from my vantage point in Florida. And my first exposure to preemptive prosecution, and I like to call it crime-free prosecution, was when Mazen al-Najjar was in prison. This was probably about 1999. And he was in prison because he's Samuel Arian's brother-in-law, and they wanted him to say something incriminating about Sammy. He spent 3.5 years in Coleman Federal Prison in solitary confinement under no charges, secret evidence, and when he was, the judge finally saw the evidence, ordered him released, and then he was deported. And next. Okay, and then Dr. Al-Arian and I were colleagues at University of South Florida, where he was a tenured professor. And so I've known him about 30 years now. I'm very good friends with the family. And he was arrested in 2003, and he spent, before the trial, 2.5 years in very harsh solitary confinement in Coleman with very limited access to anybody. There's one time he went 6 months without being allowed a single phone call. When he went to trial, his lawyers did not call any witnesses at all, and because the government failed to convict him. And so even though he was not convicted of terrorism by the jury, they were hung on 2 charges, although they were 10-2 in favor of acquittal. Because of that, the federal government threatened to prosecute again, so he reached a plea agreement with them. They didn't honor the plea agreement, and so he spent much more time in prison. In 2008, he was released on house arrest, and he is still on house arrest today. And there were 4 defendants in his case. Only one of them actually went free. Another one spent 3.5 years in the communications management unit. And Samia Hamoude was totally acquitted. The jury was not hung on any charges, but he still spent another 6 months in prison, and at immigration prison, and at the end of that time he was deported. And this is one of Sammy's lawyers was Bill Moffitt. This was his next case. So I sort of picked and chose cases that I became familiar with from where I was in Florida. And he was charged in material support of terrorism. He was a professor at Howard University. And he was acquitted by the jury of terrorism, but he was then convicted of obstruction of justice and sentenced to 11 years and he's in a CMU. And you heard a lot about the Holy Land case. This was Sammy's other lawyer, Linda Marino. She next went to that case, and there were 5 defendants in that case. And the Holy Land Foundation, it gave to many causes, not only Muslim causes, and so it's the largest charity in the country, and it was shut down. And this is just his family. To put more faces on it. And this is son Omar. He at one time when they were parting, Omar ran to give his father a hug. And because of that, the infraction of the rules, Mr. Alashi wasn't allowed any contact at all with his family for 1.5 years. And this is another Florida case. This is an early entrapment case. There's that vulnerable group of people in a very poor part of Miami. And they had a community help organization there, and they were very poor and needed money. A paid informant came and offered them money and recorded lots of things. They were charged with conspiring to blow up the Sears Tower. And so they went to trial. The government was very determined, but it took them 3 trials before they were able to find a jury that would convict any of them. So 5 of them are still in prison. One of them, Lamoran, was acquitted in the first trial, but he stayed in an immigration prison, and he was deported, even though he was a 20-year legal resident of the United States. Okay, and this another, again, came to my attention back in Florida. It's Fahad Hashmi. He had an apartment in England. He allowed a friend to store some raincoats there, and the friend allegedly gave those to Al-Qaeda members later. And so Fahad spent about 3.5 years under very restrictive solitary confinement conditions before he reached a plea agreement with the government, and he's still in very restrictive conditions in a supermax prison in Colorado. And Kifeh's sister is here, and we've heard some about him, so I'm not going to say too much and ask Kifeh about him too. Ask Sharman. Again, 17 years, and he's in the communications management unit, I believe. And then Ahmed Abu Ali was arrested in Saudi Arabia and tortured by Saudi police, brought back to this country, and he had confessed under torture to anything they wanted him to confess to. One of them was conspiring to assassinate the then President Bush, and the torture aspect wasn't really allowed in the courtroom. He was convicted of that and sentenced to 30 years. They appealed that, and the sentence was changed to life. He's in the Florence, Colorado now in the Supermax, in solitary confinement. And another case is, Dr. Afia Siddiqui was, she was educated here, and she disappeared. She's overseas, back home to visit her family. She disappeared, and a lot of people think she was in Bagram. I don't know if there's still some mystery about that, but then she, again, this is after some torture. And she was brought back here and sentenced to 86 years for it's a crazy case. I'm not going into the details. She got sentenced to 86 years, and she's in solitary confinement in Texas now. And Ziad Jaggi is a case we've been involved with a lot lately. He's from North Carolina. Ziad, his friend Omar, have been convicted of the material support of terrorism, and was conspiring to maim and murder overseas. And basically what their crime was association. They got convicted, and Ziad is sentenced to 32 years. All this time the government's been trying to get him to say something incriminating about other people, and he refuses to lie about people, and so he's in prison. And another one in the same case, again, association, he was sentenced to 45 years. And his brother also came to our town hall meeting we had on Martin Luther King Day in Washington. His brother came up to tell people about the case, and he went back home. About 3 days later, he was arrested, and he's in jail now. And the very latest thing, as we've been traveling around the country, as I was with Friends of Human Rights, and so we find out there are cases everywhere. And Shaker is a longtime resident of Columbia, Missouri, and he's got a store there called World Market Foods, and he's very much respected in the community. But he's Iraqi, and he had relatives who were suffering a great deal during the sanctions. And some of his relatives died from lack of medicine, so he broke the sanctions and sent them money. And he just got sentenced 2 weeks ago. He's going to spend 3 years somewhere, we don't know where yet, and they are letting him stay free until after Ramadan, and after that he looks forward to 3 years in prison somewhere for helping his family. And I don't have to say much about the communications management unit because you're going to hear about it soon. But they're very restrictive, and they're mostly Muslim. They did add some environmental activists and some others to make it look a little more balanced. But no contact with your family, no contact visits.
One sister has joined us today and has traveled far to really look at how she was affected by the imprisonment of her husband, who actually was a professor at one of our local universities. Hedaya Jayyousi is the wife of Dr. Kifeh Jayyousi, father, formerly Navy veteran, executive engineer, and Wayne State University professor. Dr. Kifeh founded a small charity before 9/11 to benefit the victims of war in Bosnia and Chechnya, and published a newsletter critical of U.S. foreign policy. These actions drew the wrath of the Justice Department. Even though the people Kifeh was helping, the Bosnian Muslims, were the same people that the U.S. was convicted on one charge of conspiracy to engage in violence abroad although there was virtually no evidence to support the charge. Dr. Kifeh was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Dr. Kifeh and Hedaya have 5 children. Some of them are with us today. 3 daughters and 2 sons. Their family story and struggles are published in this book, right? And without further ado, I'd like to call her up to the podium, if we would be so kind as to welcome her to the podium.
Good evening, everyone. Today I'm not going to speak about how my husband get convicted and how he is innocent and all of this, but what happened, and Kifeh take it as it's a test from God, and he need to be patient, and one day God will bring him relief. I'm here want to talk about the condition of the place he being held to serve this 12 years. The judge asked that he be spending the time in minimum security prison. But what happened, they recreate 2 units, they called inside the federal jail. Inside the United States, they call it CMU, Communication Management Unit, where the human rights and the media love to call it Little Guantanamo or North Guantanamo, because it's same rules. They apply it here inside the United States of America. It's against the Constitution, against human rights. Okay, these 2 units, I'm going to try to make it short, explain some of the rules. I go through both units because my husband being now 4 years in this 2 units. First 2 years they put him in Terre Haute, Indiana. Then with no explanation, they move him to Marion to make it more destination for me. If we want to travel to see him, it takes us 15 minutes from here, Detroit, Michigan, to Marion. First, we've seen him through glasses. We can't touch him. We can't talk to him. They are sitting in a room. They put like 35 Muslims in each unit. According to the MBR investigation and some lawyers, the government spent for last year only $14 million from our money, our tax money, to monitor them. 24-hour video, and any move they do, any speech, any word, is go direct to Washington to monitor them, to monitor their active, their talk. They put even after we file a lawsuit against this CMU unit. So what they did, they tried to balance. They brought let's say 35 Muslim, they add 4 non-Muslim, and civil case or active or human or not human. One of them is animal rights active. So to just balance, even when they bring the non-Muslim, they don't treat them equally. Like 2 weeks ago, they all sick. They catch pneumonia, and they don't wanna. First 3 of them got sick. They don't wanna bring them the food in the room. No, you need to go to the cafeteria. So all they got sick. One of the enemies, he lost his phone call. He missed his phone call. So the warden walk through every week. They do that. So he stand up and talked to her. He told her, I was sick and I can't get up. I lost my phone call. I want you to reschedule the call. It's usually, they said no, they denied it. But if one of the non-Muslim in the same unit misses his call, oh, no problem, just go schedule another call. So the warden, out of nowhere, told him, you Muslim guy, you don't believe in God. So he didn't speak because he can't speak. Otherwise, they're going to just send him to the SHU for 30 days. His high blood pressure went up, and I'm sorry with the word, he threw up. And he fell down, so they bring the doctor and the nurse. Everybody shocked why she said that. Then the next day she said she wanted them to send one of the Muslim guys so she can talk about it. When that's another element went there, she told them, okay, I said, you are Muslim, don't believe in God, and it's true, you don't believe in God, you believe in Allah, and Allah is not existing. So she make it worse. Now they try to limit their prayer time. They give them 2 hours every Friday in chaplain room to do Friday service prayer. They try to correct. Last week, during the prayer, she came with her staff, stand in front of the imam when he do lecture, and just keep watching them. They make new rules for them. You can't learn Arabic, you can't teach Arabic, you are not allowed to pray anytime you want. If you are in your cell and the officer or the guardian outside hear your voice, you're going to go to the shul. They try to ask for halal food. There is anyone there, the Jewish, the vegetarian, the regular food. When it comes to the Muslim, no halal food. My husband, he asked for a kosher food. There is one Jewish guy with them. He told him, I don't know how you eat this food. It make me sick if I try to eat it. They ask for extra time to when we are like fasting. They need special their lunch like to be held. Now the sunset is like almost night. No, we can't hold the food. Eat it at 12 or 11, or you miss your lunch, or the dinner is like 3 o'clock. You're gonna allow only for Ramadan. So last March, like March 27, I don't know if you heard about the case of Michigan militia in Michigan. The judge dropped the charges, and there are 5 men and 1 woman. His name is Mr. Stone. He stand up and he said in his wiretapping, we are willing to, we're going to kill police officer even if we are willing to kill their families and their children. The revolution is coming, and the judge said because there is no evidence, we don't find any bomb or anything, so there is no enough evidence. It's the freedom of speech. His wife talked to the radio and she said, thanks God we are in a free country when there is a freedom of speech. I'm really telling her, sorry, there is no freedom of speech, there is no freedom of religion. My husband, he didn't say anything. We never have a gun in our home. We never did anything. He's a citizen of the United States since he's a kid. He served in the Navy. He have high top security clearance. He's working in D.C. public school where Hillary Clinton always there, and he talked to everybody. He never think to do anything. His case, material support for the during Session Road to kill or kidnap people overseas. So as you see, nothing treated equally. I hope if the Muslims stand up, not for us, for our next generation. This is our country, and we need to make rules apply to the Muslim and non-Muslim. We are under one nation. We need to feel we are treated equally. If I want to go on and on, I'm not going to finish. It's too much stories about this CMU unit and how they do a lot of discrimination. Like, I'm afraid now to talk anything about it, or I need like my lawyer permission, because I don't want my husband to be in more trouble. He have damage already. He's tortured already enough. So what I said, really, sometimes I think about it when I try to prepare my speech, and I said, what am I gonna write? Okay, I need to talk to the lawyer. Can I say this or not? I really watch TV and I see the people in Syria and Egypt. They are not afraid now. They are not scared, and we are here scared. I don't think this is fair. Really, it's not fair, and I think that's all. Excuse my English or my fast speak, and nothing else I want to say. Thank you.
Without further ado, I'd like to call our brother Chaplain James Yee, if we would be so kind as to welcome him with a round of applause.
First of all, thank you for inviting me here today. It's an honor and pleasure. On the program here, you have me down here, James Yee, author, former chaplain of Guantanomo, For God and Country and Interfaith Americans. For God and Country. First of all, you heard that's the title of the book that I authored. For God and Country, Faith and Patriotism Under Fire. And I served God and Country as one of our nation's first U.S. Army Muslim chaplains. One of our nation's first Muslim chaplains to serve in the U.S. military. Interfaith Americans. I myself am an interfaith American. I was raised Lutheran and I converted to Islam. And I love people of all faiths. I'm an interfaith American. But that's not what I want to talk about today. What I do want to talk about, some other things. First is why I love coming to Dar al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. This is not my first time. The first time I was here actually was a few years ago when I gave a presentation about my experience in Guantanomo, and I'm going to give that again. But I love coming here because the Imam Ilahi, actually allowed me to sleep and stay at his house while I was hosted here. So this community is very generous. And that was the only time that being invited to speak to many different places, many different communities, that the Imam allowed me to stay at his house. So Imam Ilahi, wherever you are, Jazakumullah khair, I'll never forget that time. And that's why I love coming here. Because that's the character of this community. But I also want to talk about something else. We heard Steve talk about how he was an attorney for Yasin Arab, someone who was targeted intentionally for prosecution. I was targeted intentionally for prosecution. And that's why you see my name up on this wall. James Yee, targeted intentionally for prosecution. Steve said that the people up here are real people, and they have real stories. I'm a real person, and I have a real story. We saw the video about solitary confinement, and we heard a little bit about the conditions in these CMUs, and what it's like to be in solitary confinement. I was in solitary confinement for 76 days. But how did I get there? It was in 2002, 2003, when I was serving in Guantanamo Bay as the Muslim chaplain assigned to Camp Delta. Camp Delta, where there are a series of prison cell blocks, where the cells are actually like cages. And when I was there in 2002 and 2003, the people being held in these cage-like cells were all Muslim. And they numbered upwards towards 700 people. Around 660 or so. That was in 2002, Guantanamo Bay. I was a chaplain assigned to this prison camp. And it was very clear from the very first day that I entered into these cell blocks and interacted with these individuals that the people being held by the U.S. government, by our U.S. military, were being treated very cruelly, being subjected to cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. We're being tortured. We're being persecuted for their faith, for being Muslim. Every single prisoner in this camp is Muslim. But let me explain how they were being treated and how they were being persecuted for their faith. I've often said that what was going on in Guantanamo was the use of religion as a weapon. And because every single prisoner was Muslim, it was the use of Islam against these prisoners as a weapon. How so? Listen to what was described for me by one particular prisoner, and then later confirmed by the American Muslim translators who worked down in Guantanamo, that there was indeed an interrogation room, not unlike other interrogation rooms, which had a chair and a D-ring on the ground, where prisoners would be short shackled maybe for hours, as they were interrogated, sometimes not even being allowed to pray. But this one particular interrogation room also had in it, marked on the floor, a large circle. And in the center of that large circle was a symbol. It was a satanic-like symbol, a satanic star in the center of this circle. And the interrogators would take prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, who they knew believed in one God, and they put them in the center of this satanic circle. And they attempted to force these individuals to bow down and prostrate, like in the form of the Islamic prayer. Maybe when you've seen a Muslim pray, we bow, we put our forehead to the ground in honor of worshiping one God. These interrogators attempted to force these Muslims to prostrate in the center of this satanic circle, while they would scream at them that Satan is your God now, not Allah, the creator of all things, the heavens and the earth. And this is done, again, because they understood the belief of Muslims, that we believe in one God. And they tried to break these individuals of that belief. Another way in which religion was being used as a weapon goes back to what we heard first in the news in 2005, that the Holy Quran was being desecrated in Guantanamo. And I can confirm that that indeed was happening in Guantanamo Bay when I was there. Guards, when they inspected the cells, looking at the items, came to the Quran, recklessly throwing them on the ground, kicking them, stepping on them. Interrogators taking the Quran into the interrogation room in front of a shackled prisoner who couldn't resist, slamming the Quran on the ground, sitting on it. Later investigations into the abuses of the Muslim holy book revealed that at times even the Quran was urinated on by American soldiers. This was happening when I was there at Guantanamo Bay. But this was being done because these individuals understood how Muslims respect and revere what we consider to be the literal words of God. And that in our homes we put the Quran on the highest shelf in our house. Not unlike other of our Abrahamic brothers and sisters who respect the Word of God. If you go into a Jewish synagogue, you find at the front something known as the Ark, where the scriptures are sometimes placed under lock and key out of protection and out of reverence to what is considered to be the Word of God. In Islam, we respect the words of God in a similar manner. And that was understood by American intelligence officers, because that's why they desecrated the Quran, to try and elicit some information from these individuals, even though they may have had little to none. But nevertheless, this was another way in which religion was being used as a weapon. One more way. Let me describe for you the fierce competition between interrogators down in Guantanamo to get that information, to stop that next 9/11 attack. There was competition between the military interrogators, the federal intelligence interrogators. There was competition between male interrogators, female interrogators. But the female interrogators felt that maybe they had an advantage over their male counterparts. And what was that advantage? Their gender, their sexuality. And some of them were very ready, very quick to go into an interrogation room with a Muslim male prisoner and strip off her own clothes and stand naked in front of a Muslim male prisoner who she knew came from a very conservative Muslim society. Perhaps he was a young male, never had any physical contact ever with another woman. They understood that. They understood the culture of Muslims. They understood that when we pray in an Islamic center, there's an area for women to pray and an area for men to pray, and the separation of the genders within our Islamic communities. interrogators and intelligence officers understood that, and these female interrogators exploited that aspect of our culture, believing that it could help them gain some information. Later investigations into abuses of prisoners at Guantanamo Bay suggested that female interrogators even went so far as grabbing the genitals of Muslim male prisoners in the course of interrogating them. This is using religion as a weapon. And as a chaplain in Guantanamo Bay, as an American citizen who was raised in the American school system, going to social studies class, learning about the pilgrims who landed on Plymouth Rock, came to the New World to find a place where they can have religious freedom, where they can practice their religion, their faith, in the manner in which they chose. That was the first cause of anyone here in America, religious freedom. But today we have the opposite. The American government, the American military, using religion as a weapon, persecuting these individuals in Guantanamo Bay for merely being Muslim. So as the chaplain of this prison camp, I raised some objections. I raised some questions to my chain of command as to whether or not some of these things were violating our own values as a nation, whether they were violating our values as a military. Were they violating our own values as a humanity? And at first I believed that my chain of command valued that input I brought to them, because they would understand now why prisoners in Guantanamo were protesting all the time, why they were demonstrating all the time in their cage-like cells, banging on their steel beds and banging on their steel doors. They understood it was because they were being abused and tortured in these interrogation rooms, and they took this anger out on the guards when they came back to the cell blocks. I believed my input was valued by my chain of command because I received a stellar officer evaluation report in Guantanamo Bay, the best that I'd ever received in my 14 years in the U.S. military. And then I was given something else called R&R, rest, relaxation. After a lengthy deployment of 10 months in Guantanamo, I got R&R to go home and see my wife and my daughter. But knowing after 2 weeks, I would have to return to Guantanamo Bay and finish what would be a year of duty. So I got this R&R. I got on a plane at Gitmo. It landed in Jacksonville, Florida. But I didn't make my connecting flight to Seattle. I didn't make it because I was met by some immigration officers and customs officials. And then I was met by, excuse me. And then I was met by intelligence officers, Army counterintelligence, naval criminal investigators, the FBI. And they all made these claims that I was carrying some suspicious documents. And then they claimed that I was carrying classified documents. And they threw me in jail. They arrested me in secret. Nobody knew what had happened to me. My wife and daughter waiting at the airport, as I learned later, for hours, crying when I didn't show up. My wife, she called to New Jersey, where my parents lived, to see if my plans had changed. They heard nothing. Nobody knew where I was. It was like I had disappeared in America, in my own country. But where was I? I was sitting in a cell in solitary confinement. They transferred me to this prison known as the Consolidated Naval Break. It's in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a place where the Bush administration and the Obama administration has kept enemy combatants Enemy combatants that are of U.S. citizenship or that have been taken into custody on U.S. soil. The foreign enemy combatants we know are in Guantanamo Bay and in other CIA black sites. But if you were taken into custody on U.S. soil or had U.S. citizenship, you're brought to the Consolidated Naval Brig in Charleston, South Carolina. That's where I was taken. They threw me in the back of this truck next to an armed guard. The armed guard took out of his bag these goggles. They were painted black. He put them over my eyes so I couldn't see. He took out these devices, put them over my ears. Now I can't hear. I was already shackled at the wrists, the waist, and the ankles. I was being subjected to something known as sensory deprivation. Sensory deprivation. And it's done to instill fear and intimidation and confusion. But it was something I knew very much about because that's how they were treating the prisoners in Guantanamo. So I understood the situation I was in. President Bush had said the prisoners in Guantanamo, they don't have rights. Geneva Conventions, the international body of law that governs armed conflict, they don't apply to the prisoners in Guantanamo. And now I find myself a U.S.-born citizen, graduate of West Point, served in the U.S. Army as an officer and a chaplain, in the same predicament. I feared that even my rights as a U.S. citizen were being stripped by my own government. I had no idea where they were taking me. But I would end up in that cell for 76 days, as these accusations swirled in the media that I was going to be charged with spying, espionage, aiding the enemy, mutiny and sedition. I was even threatened with the death penalty by military prosecutors. But after 76 days in prison, I was released. Those accusations, those capital crimes, they never materialized into actual charges. I was reinstated as a chaplain back at Fort Lewis. My record was wiped clear, after which I tendered my resignation. I received an honorable discharge in January 2005. But that's what I went through. Why? Because I raised some concerns about how prisoners in Guantanamo were being mistreated. Why was I arrested? They were trying to preempt something from happening. Probably they were trying to preempt that information that people were being tortured in Guantanamo from coming to light. But I struggled through those days, and I'm out of prison now. I'm one of the few on that board that got out of prison, that won its case. Most of them are still serving time. I know what it's like to be in solitary confinement. I know what it's like to be subjected to sensory deprivation, to be chained and shackled like the prisoners in Guantanamo. I know what PTSD is like, post-traumatic stress disorder. My name is James Yee. I'm the former U.S. Army chaplain of Guantanamo Bay. I urge everyone who is here today to support the organization, the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. It's one of the few organizations that is aggressively advocating on behalf of these individuals who are swept up, that are being prosecuted intentionally and preemptively. I'll tell you that when I was in prison, there were no organizations that were on the front lines speaking out on my behalf in any great manner. It wasn't until the charges were dropped that many of them said, "How can we help?" But when I was in prison and under charges, organizations wouldn't touch me with the 10-foot pole. Some of them probably thought, what if he really is guilty? But I'll tell you, the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms, it's not like that. They will advocate for due process, regardless of who you are and regardless of whether you may have committed some type of crime. They will advocate for justice, for fairness. And we know that most of the people that are swept up haven't done a thing. As you heard, in all of these cases, there's not been one person harmed. There's not been one person killed, nor any property damaged. So we know the story. So support this organization. Thank them for putting on this program and partnering with Dar al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom here, and the other civil liberties coalition partners that are here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother, for coming back to our community, and inshallah this won't be your last time. The next person I'd like to call to the podium is a brother representing the Council on American Islamic Relations, our president and chairman of CARE. Michigan couldn't be with us today because he has to be somewhere else, but we have a representative from the Council on American and Islamic Relations. CARE has done a lot of great things. Brother Dawood Walid and I have worked and collaborated together. One of the things that I'll never forget Brother Dawood saying to members of the, at the time, Homeland Security was, who do we go after if we have a complaint? If I have a complaint with an immigration or customs and borders, or who do we go to? Because there's no legal redress. There's no legal redress. And these are the problems that we're facing as civil rights organizations, and trying to find out where do we go? What's our option? Who do we talk to? You know, no legal redress. Brother Dawood painted that picture to me, and I remember just sitting in this meeting and saying, wow, really? And I was waiting for a response. Believe it or not, the assistant director of Homeland Security was like, anyone want to help me? I swear to God, kid you not. Anyone want to help me? And one of the ICE, they're first, always as usual, they said that, well, that's not our fault. We're just taking orders from Congress. Blamed it on Congress. So you need to speak to your congressmen and have them, empower, you. And I mean, these are the types of things that that we have to deal with. Brother Rahim Hanifa is responsible for communications outreach effort and the PIFTA workshop presenting Islam to fellow Americans and other initiatives at CARE, Michigan. Rahim graduated with a bachelor's degree in pre-law political science and sociology from Michigan State University, and has experience working on political and social grassroots campaigns. As a campaign organizer and Michigan House of Representative intern, Rahim brings extensive advocacy, political, and communication skills to CARE Michigan. He has worked as an assistant director of political and social grassroots campaigns across the country. Rahim has run campaign offices in Nevada, New Hampshire, and throughout Michigan. As an intern for the Michigan House of Representatives, Rahim worked in different areas pertaining to the media and communications. He has assisted with press releases, television broadcasting, and research. Rahim is dedicated to social justice and activism. He recognized the need not only to bridge the gap between all Americans and American Muslims, but also among American Muslims in different communities. If we would please welcome him to the podium.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I just want to first thank Rashid Beydoun and Sharmeen Siddiqui for organizing this conference and the organizations involved. And also I want to just give my support to the sister Hedaya and her family regarding the issue that they're facing. It's very difficult to come here and tell your story like that. So inshallah, we all should be praying and offering whatever support we can to the sister and her family, inshallah. As was said, my name is Rahim Hanif, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for CARE Michigan, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Michigan chapter here. And some of you may know about CARE Michigan, some of you may not. So just briefly, I will just talk about what CARE Michigan does, some of the issues that we're facing here in this area, and some ways that the community can get involved to work on issues of civil rights and liberties. CARE Michigan's primary goal is civil rights and advocacy. We work defending cases of discrimination regarding civil rights and liberty issues for Muslim Americans. We also build a lot of coalitions and collaborate with people outside of the Muslim community on issues of civil rights and justice. We work with interfaith communities, different political groups, and also grassroots communities across Michigan. And right now what we're facing is, in addition to the general cases of civil rights abuses that we've been facing for many years, whether it's at the workplace, schools, other employment facilities. But additionally, we're facing a political climate that is now even more intense and even more coming against minority communities in a number of ways, as what has been described earlier, inflicting many civil rights and liberties abuses against minority communities all across the country. And we do have organizations that are working actively to combat some of these instances of discrimination and Islamophobia, and CARE Michigan is one of those organizations. And one of the things that we have been facing right here in Michigan is issues of border abuse, Muslims crossing the border, the Canadian border. They've been handcuffed, they've been detained multiple times. Whenever they cross, some of them have work on the Canadian border, some of them have family across in Canada and Windsor, and whenever they go and visit these individuals, they've been detained, handcuffed for a number of hours, improper questioning, and this has happened to citizens, to non-citizens, to attorneys, to blue-collar workers, to professors, to a number of individuals, and the same trait they all have is they're Muslim or they're people of color. And CARE Michigan, we organized our community. We contacted elected officials. We contacted, DHS and the Customs and Border Patrol a number of times. And when those instances were not successful, we recently launched a lawsuit against Customs and Border Patrol, FBI, on this issue. And this is an ongoing suit that we have going on. And inshallah, in the upcoming months or even years, we'll have some success in regards to this issue. Another thing is that CARE Michigan has recently been working on is due to the political climate in which many politicians have tried to capitalize on this fear of Muslims and Islam. They've organized around this issue of Sharia and this Sharia scare that Muslim Islamic beliefs, their Islamic beliefs, are somehow threatening to the foundations of this country, and that any attempt at Muslims organizing and being politically active and asserting our rights somehow threatens the foundation of this country, and somehow it's an attempt to undermine the Constitution and insert some type of strict Islamic law on our nation, which we know is completely false. Muslims are very active, they're law-abiding, they're business people, they're attorneys, they're doctors, generally very law-abiding citizens that are contributing to this country and have no desire to overthrow or bring any negative influence into this country. So recently there has been a bill introduced to ban foreign laws, i.e. specifically Islamic law, and this phenomenon has been catching and spreading all across the nation, and recently it's come to Michigan. And what these bills would do is they would limit and even ban religious freedoms and civil liberties that people have to engage in certain type of marriage contracts based on religious and Islamic principles, to have wills in accordance to their religious beliefs, to even have the government have religious accommodations in schools, so halal meat, allowing children to have a prayer time, as is in some schools in the Dearborn area and other areas where there are high concentrations of Muslims. And we've been working on this issue, and we've built coalitions around this issue with the Michigan Catholic Conference, Jewish Voices of Peace, because even though the intent of such bills are to restrict the rights and liberties of Muslim Americans, these bills have influences upon other people of multiple faiths, and that's why we've had people from the Catholic community come out and help us against this bill, and we've recently held a Capital Day a few months ago, our second annual Capital Day, in which we brought dozens of Muslims to Lansing throughout the day to meet with their elected officials, talk to them about these issues and why such issues are unconstitutional, they harm the fabric of America, and they cast fear and suspicion upon law-abiding citizens. So these are some things that we're working on, and again, I mentioned how we built coalitions, because that is one of the ways in which you ensure justice for your own self. You build coalitions, you assist people on common causes of justice, and by that effort, you build friends and you make your power stronger in your community to advocate for issues that are affecting your community. Additionally, we've had some instances of mosque opposition, not just in New York. That was one that was very well publicized. But even in the Metro Detroit area, CARE Michigan has worked on a few cases in Sterling Heights, Farmington Hills area, and Pittsfield Township, which is a section right outside of Ann Arbor, in which there have been groups of Islamophobes and anti-Muslim bigots who have organized against mosques to be built in these communities. And CARE Michigan represented these communities against this mosque opposition. We helped them file all the necessary paperwork to do everything by the book to make sure that when they took their cases in front of these different boards and city commissions, that there would be no problems with their paperwork regarding their cases, and that they would be approved to build. And we've had successes with this. In Sterling Heights, there were about 1,000 signatures against the mosque for no other reason that it was a Muslim community that was growing in this area. And because the community and CARE Michigan got involved and we did everything by the book, we made sure they dotted all their I's, crossed all their T's. Everything was done perfectly, that they had no reason but to allow the mosque to be built in the area, even though there was a large anti-Muslim campaign that tried to oppose the mosque. And similarly, we're working on things in Farmington Hills right now, and we've had some successes getting the Islamic Center built there, actually the building allowed to be to purchase there, and also we're currently having some ongoing issues in Pittsfield Township. So again, there's a number of issues I could talk about, but primarily, we have a lot of issues that have been outlined throughout the day, and the question is, what are we doing about it? So luckily, and alhamdulillah, in this area, we do have a number of organizations that are growing, that are working against injustice and are working for common causes of justice, including CARE Michigan, the NCPCF, ADC, the organization that was recently started with Rashid Beydoun, and we have numerous organizations that are working for common causes of justice, and we should do our best to be involved in them. So there are a number of levels in which we can be involved. We can find out what are the needs of these organizations. Do they need people to intern with these organizations? Do they need people to go out in their communities and make people aware of the issues, and also how they can combat these issues? CARE Michigan is always looking for interns. Most of these groups are always looking for interns and people who can assist. So please, if you have time, contact us. We'll be more than happy to let you know what you can do to help out. Additionally, there is a strong political element in all of this. There are politicians that profit off of this climate, and as long as they see there's a base that is able to be persuaded and vote against our interests, against the interests of minority communities, and really ultimately against the interests of America as a whole, there are some politicians that will seek to capitalize off of this. So, we have to support politicians that we do see are committed to justice. We have to do what we can. Right now, it's a kind of election season. There are a lot of politicians in the area that are looking for support. They're looking for interns to go knock door to door and help them with their campaigns. And all you have to do is, go on Michigan.gov, see who is your elected official, see who are the elected officials in your area, and if they're true to justice and they're true to causes, you should look and see who those are. Not being partisan, just common causes of food. You can just see who's out there pushing causes for justice, and do your part to support them. Because we have to understand that this is a very long-term issue. We can look back in the history of America and we can see that there's other communities that have come against these causes of injustice. The Jewish community, Catholic community, they all were heavily discriminated against, and they overcame these issues. And the Muslim community can do the same. So with that, inshallah, I will conclude, and you can contact me later, and you can visit caremichigan.org to get involved and learn about more areas in which you can get involved to combat these instances of injustice. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah, right now I'd like to call the Executive Director, Steve Downs, and as he will provide us other means as to what we can do. So.
Well, I want to just take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. About a year and a half ago, a group of then 18, now it's 20 organizations, got together and said, look, these problems that we've identified are just overwhelming, and we have to address them in a collective way. Each one of these organizations was touched in some way by the kind of Islamophobia, preemptive prosecution, prisoner abuse that was going on. And so we formed this coalition to try to do it on a collective basis. We believe that all of these cases are fakes and phonies, and that there's a mountain of exculpatory information in the Justice Department showing that these people are innocent, and the Justice Department simply refused to turn it over. So what we were trying to do is to get legislation through Congress that would require that all of these cases be revisited as their own Inspector General has recommended. And if they did that, and if they found that there was exculpatory information that was not turned over, this would require new trials, possibly release all the people out, all the prisoners. We're the only organization doing it. We're pushing this hard. This is our legislative attempt to get everybody out and to try to correct what has been a decade of injustice. And another legislative action that we're pushing is to try to get pretrial detention, solitary confinement, regulated by the judiciary. Right now, it is regulated only by the prisons. The prisons get to decide who they lock up in solitary confinement and who they don't. And the courts take the position, it's just a matter of security in the jail. It has nothing to do with us. And so they use it with the Justice Department to try to extract confessions, to try to get people to cooperate, to try to break people down, to try to torture them. And it's frankly, that's it. The conditions in the U.S. jails right now are not significantly different than they are in Guantanamo. They're simply little Guantanamos. And we have to bring this under judicial control, and they have to come up with real reasons to say why these people are dangerous. It's not just that they were charged with something dangerous. And by the way, why is being charged with terrorism for keeping a bag of socks for somebody in your apartment for a week more dangerous than being a serial rapist or killer? I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyway, so that would be our second legislative attempt. We are trying to prepare a database that accurately records information on all these prisoners and all the cases, including the briefs and the charges, so that lawyers can look at them. They can get information about expert witnesses, how to cross-examine expert witnesses, what different tactics have been tried, and so on, so that we can try these cases better. We've been very unsuccessful up until now, and we need to do a better job of it. We have a group that is working on media outreach, trying to change the narrative of how people understand this, to get articles published, and I think we've been very successful. If you go to our website, you see the website up there. We have a lot of articles published up there. We publish a news digest, and we're hoping with that to change the narrative. And finally, perhaps most important, we are trying to maintain an outreach to the prisoners and their families. Above all else, we do not want these people forgotten. We do not want their stories forgotten. We do not want them to suffer any more than they have already. There are young children that are being brought up without parents or with only one parent, and we want them to have as normal a childhood as we can possibly arrange, and we need to get to know them. And it's trouble. I'm so pleased that Hedaya was able to come here today and talk. It takes an enormous amount of courage for people to stand up and talk. But your story is very important, and it has to be told, and so does the story of all of these other people. And I have to say that Sister Charlene back here has been stalwart in her efforts to try to contact all of these people and make sure that somehow they are cared for, that they know that we care about them and we want them in a safe place. I feel that I go around the country depressing people. This has been a very depressing afternoon, and I just want to end with a few good things that we are doing and ways that you can help. One of the greatest ways that you can help right now is to become a member of the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. And there's a very practical reason for that. When I try to get legislation passed through dysfunctional Congress, I need to have a little clout, and I want to be able to say, I've got 1 million members standing behind me who agree with me. So I would love to see you do that, and you can sign up online, and in this envelope there's a little section over there that shows you how to do it. So I hope that you do nothing else, you go over and sign up for the National Coalition today. Another thing that we can do, and Sister Charlene will have some more information, but we can provide it to you, is to adopt a prisoner. We have a program going right now in which we're trying to at least get them some canteen money, the poor ones, people that don't have any mosque or family to help them, just so that they can get some canteen money they can use to buy things in prison. And if we could get 100 people to donate $100, as Ramadan is coming in, this would be a great way to show the spirit of Ramadan. We would really appreciate that. Another way is to support a defendant. I was tremendously heartened by what happened with Carlos Montes, because he was basically, public pressure forced backed the DA down, forced them to drop the charges, or at least give a good settlement. And I would love to see that happen with all of the Muslim defendants. So if we have your information, if we can call on you, we can call on everybody, say in Michigan, and say, in Michigan, there is a very important case out there. We believe this person is innocent. We need everybody to show up and to support this case. And say, as members of the public, we don't agree that this person should be preemptively prosecuted. So we need that information and your willingness to get out. We need people to get out and talk to their congressman. And of course, you have a wonderful congressman here. You have John Conyers, and we love him. But there are many others around, and we need to be able to put pressure on Congress to get legislation passed. We need to have a chapter of the National Coalition started right here. I would love to have you guys, members of not only members, but members of a chapter here. We've started one in Albany, and this would be a great place to start one here, and I think we have some leaders that would do it. And finally, I would love to have some of you go out with organizations that you know and set up educational events so that we can come and talk to you as we're talking to you here. This would be very helpful. Envelope, wave it over your head. I say, everybody got a, wave an envelope. No, you don't have one. Come on, find one. Everyone in the back, can you find an envelope? Come on down front and get an envelope and wave it over your head. Okay. Now, this is one of the ways that we're going to get people out of jail. What we need we need your time, we need your talent, but we also need the resources. We've got to pay people's expenses as they go around the country. So I've included in here a pledge card, and it includes several things, and I'd like you to fill it out. Put your name, address, and so on, so that we know who you are. Over on the right, there's a little section about how you become a member of the National Coalition, and if you could break that off and keep it, then you can go back and home and join. It's done online. We sign people up online, which makes it very efficient. Before the other section here is a pledge card, and if you have a check with you today, if you can write us a check, that would be great. Put it with the pledge card and the check back in the envelope and hand it in to us, and it would be very efficient. If you don't have a checkbook with us, if you can't write us a check, then give us a pledge card, put an amount down, and then take the envelope back with you, and then mail in a check, yeah? You know, Yassine Arif was my client. I represented him, and after he was sent off to jail for 15 years, we were very good friends at that time, and once they put you into the prison, he immediately went into isolation, into solitary confinement, and they started to move him around the country. And after just 2 weeks, I found out that he was in Lake Placid, which wasn't that far away, so I ran up to see him because we had no contact with him at all. And they brought him up to me out of solitary confinement. Now, Yassine was a Kurd. He had spent all of his life being shot at and bombed at by different people. He'd been half starved to death. He was tough. He'd been through an awful lot in his life before he came to America. And when they brought him up to me out of solitary confinement, he was so dazed and disorganized he couldn't even speak. And he tried to formulate words, and he couldn't do it, and he just began to tremble. And finally, as I was sitting there, I realized the only thing I could do, I took him over, and I took him in my arms, and I held him. And he broke into tears. He broke into tears and sobbing. And that was after only 2 weeks in solitary confinement. And I've never gotten over that. And I'm saying, if there is anything I can do to get him and all the others out, I want to do it. And